Have you ever wished for something more than this reality?
I'm convinced I grew up in a place where the lines between the fantastical and the real world were so blurred.
That this earth was too bland and boring for you to inhabit it?
I could walk from a hole in a tree and into another world.
What if I told you that there are people who can create whole paracosms and stories inside their minds?
I've been told that the cloud walkers would come in with the bay and ride the clouds into the cities for their morning commute.
But in doing so, don't they lose a little more of themselves each time?
Armed with their briefcases wearing their signature bowler hats.
I remember
a long squat house tucked away in the hills. The street below us was named Smiley Street, as if it was impossible to drown there.
I'm like that. I have this superpower. I call them my thinks, but really, they're a window to my soul. A bit poetic, I know. It just comes with being a writer. Everything and everyone that is important to me has played a role in the grand theatric that is my mind.
There was a saucer swing tied to the tree in the side yard, and a trampoline in the back.
Don't get it confused. It's not my imagination. My thinks are somewhere I go when I'm happiest or inspired or most excited. They are where I get my best ideas.
Sometimes we would put 2 or 3 people on the saucer swing at once.
Not that ideas don't come from elsewhere. The world is proof enough of that.
Or jump so high on the trampoline we thought we'd sail right over the trees.
I think that if everyone on Earth had thinks like mine, we would be unstoppable, which can be good and bad.
There was a big yellow room with bunk beds for sleeping and blackberries in the backyard for the fairies to eat.
My thinks go all the way back to when I was just 3 years old. I remember going to the doctor's office and watching Enchanted.
The fairies grew out of the thistles hanging over the fence with little tufts of cotton that flew away on the slightest breeze.
It's a movie about a princess who gets trapped inside the real world. I was given a hat that measures the electrons in my brain.
We had to carefully tuck them in the palms of our hands and guide them to the fruit.
It's a very uncomfortable hat, not very fun to sleep in.
Once, I decided to run away, but I only made it down the street before getting stopped by a patrol car.
My parents were worried about me. Was their precious baby girl even okay?
I was brought home safe and sound.
I was doing strange things. I would zone out, and when someone would try to interrupt me, I was irritable and cranky.
There was an old rotting house we were forbidden to go into.
Every time I try to explain my thinks to someone new, they always put on a polite face, but I can see the pucker up underneath.
It was an old ranger house, but decay had eroded its foundation.
It's a subtle shift in the eyes, the way the mouth sits.
We made a home in the bushes behind it and came home with poison oak rash everywhere.
Rarely, when I tell people, I get,
Oh, I do that.
once it was even...
That's just called having an imagination.
Let me ask you a question.
No, let me ask you a question.
Does imagination make you flick your wrists and wave your arms
What
sporadically
about
in
it is
excitement?
so society refined, like you are so ashamed.
Do you utter strange words and syllables in disarray?
I am a part of you. How can you ignore
Do
me?
you wake up in terror because the nightmare was just a little too real, and
Is
now
it any
it's
easier
following you
when
into the
discounting
real
your
world?
memories when trying to write a story?
No.
No?
The answer is usually no.
That's what I thought you'd say. These grand philosophies about lost children and ancient army ruins, or
If you're like me,
only not to
you've
little
probably
boys,
had
or
to face
even
similar
superheroes would not exist
or
without
you've
me.
forgotten trying to explain them
Without
altogether.
you.
Part of me wants to do just that. Lock my things in and let
You
them
are
alone.
a coward,
Keep them out
afraid
of my
your own mind.
stories.
The only way I can through to you is through memory.
When I got older, I began to wonder, what exactly are my things? So I decided to Google it, the age-old method for finding out information.
I've often wondered what my life would be like if I had spent the first 7 years of my life anywhere else.
Late in bed one night, I consulted my iPhone. The result? Maladaptive daydreaming.
In a big city, up in the mountains, on a farm, with animals, I would be different. Maybe.
Maybe. Now, you might think, well, that sounds nice. Daydreaming.
For starters, I wouldn't have grown up in plants.
Very picturesque.
Poison oak,
Nope.
sticky monkey bar?
You're missing the maladaptive part.
Coyote brush, fennel?
According to my late night research, people with this sleep disorder would have trouble functioning in their day-to-day lives because of it.
Even the invasive ice plant and mustard flowers that dot the fields?
They would have trouble living in the real world.
I've sucked the sour juices out of more sour grass than I can count, even after somebody told me the dogs might have peed on it.
I knew them all. At first, I just brushed it off. I had always been able to stop thinking before. There was no way I could get lost in the worlds I created.
Past the chain link fence and beyond the clump of cypress trees was a tunnel to the end of the earth.
But then, time wore on.
You could hunt for old treasure there. The rusted parts of some long forgotten machine. If you look up, you can just barely see the bunkers watching over you.
Time wore on.
You feel like you can see forever.
Time wore on, and I realized maybe it wasn't so much being able to stop daydreaming.
We could play in the cut down tree until it was towed away.
Maybe it was the perceptions of the world that would come with it.
We would get married and make a home in the big bush.
See, I could stop anytime I wanted.
We would climb cliffs carved by ocean runoff.
But what if elements of my own mind were slowly bleeding into the real world?
We would hike the ridge and listen for the sound of the tide bell.
Well, how much of me is who I really am? And how much of it is just imagined? Do I see the world the way it really is? Or the way I want it to be?
I remember.
What? Please tell me. Anything.
I remember sliding down the hill in front of our house on a cardboard sled.
Is that all?
I remember one night, raccoons stole my bag of apples, and I bravely toddled up to them and stole it back.
I was 4.
There was a climbing tree down the street from our house where we used to play. Its base surrounded by wild strawberries that were safe to eat. I was told it was there, my mom told me.
Don't eat that mushroom.
And then I did.
I was 2.
Your memories make you who you are. Your thinks, or maladaptive daydreaming, or whatever society wants to call it nowadays, are no less a part of you than that. Don't try to limit yourself just because you think people won't understand. In the long run, they do not matter.
You're right. I'm me. If I'd grown up anywhere else,
I would be different, for sure.
instead, I'm at home when I feel a sea breeze.
When I smell coyote brush in the only way that I can.
I'm at myself when I hear the owls and coyotes chattering away at night.
When I taste sour grass and wild strawberries.
When I touch a wisp of thistledown and I'm reminded of everyday magic. Sometimes life sucks. I'm bored and I have to think to escape.
But I know I'll always come back. Most of the time I don't even need to think because the real world is so amazing you can find fantasy there anyway.
It's there. You just have to look for it. So, to anyone who finds this,
to anyone who feels just out of place,
to anyone who gets lost in their minds and can't always find a way out, I see you, I hear you, and I can't guarantee you will find a way out. But I do know what works for me is remembering the happiest times, the best of times, the tiny glints of everyday magic that make the real world so worth coming back to. The things that make life beautiful, glorious, and above all, magnificent.